Hello everyone. The Union Budget was presented on the 1st of February this year. It had many firsts. It was presented about a month in advance than its usual date. This means that the spending can start from the new financial year. Other than this, first time in the history of independent India, we saw the railways budget being merged with the Union budget. This is very significant as well. And more importantly, it marks the end of the planning era. The expenditure will no longer be classified as plan and non-plan expenditure, but instead as capital and revenue expenditure. This is very significant. The budget also stands out because it was presented after the significant demonetization move. So budget had many provisions and some of them passed under the radar. We'll talk to our in-house experts, our policy researchers at Vision India Foundation to know more about some of the reforms which were announced in the budget and which didn't get its due attention. These are particularly in education, foreign affairs and infrastructure. We'll speak to our in-house policy researchers to understand more about them. First, we'll speak to Shyam. Shyam is a research associate at Vision India Foundation studying civilization studies. More importantly, he has a background in EdTech and computer science engineering. And he has analyzed the impact of the union budget on the education sector. So let's talk to Shyam about his take on what's in store for the education sector. Shyam.
Thank you, Shobhit. The education budget this year has a lot of expectation because it's the first budget after the draft National Education Policy which was released last year, and there were a lot of policy initiatives that were spoken of in the last year. First of all, the outlay. The outlay has increased by 10% to 79,686 crores. We look at the primary and higher education first. Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, the centre's flagship education program, has received a funding allocation increase of 1,000 crores. And this is to be focused primarily on outcome-based learning. Let's look at some budget allocations in the primary and higher education sectors. Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, the centre's flagship education scheme, has received a funding allocation increase of 1,000 crores. There is a stronger focus on quality and learning outcomes. Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, the centre's flagship educational program, has received a budget allocation increase of 1,000 crores. There is also a stronger focus on learning outcomes. The scholarships for students has increased from 80 crores to 600 crores. A local innovation and quality improvement fund has been set up to foster local innovation, ICT in education and other initiatives in the educationally backward districts of India. Or a key policy initiative is the setting up of the National Testing Agency. This is to be a centralized nodal platform which will handle all the testing in India. A key advantage of this is that it frees the CBSE to focus on educational initiatives. There is a very strong focus on university education in this budget. There has been an allocation of 5,000 PG medical seats. Moreover, in view of fulfilling the government's vision of having 20 world-class educational institutions, the funding for the IITs and IIMs have been increased significantly. The IITs have seen a funding increase from 4,984 crores last year to 7,856 crores this year, and the IIMs from 730 crores to 1,030 crores. A key policy initiative that was announced last year was the setting up of the Higher Education Financing Agency, a body that would give soft loans to universities to set up world-class infrastructure. A start has been made with the allocation of 25 crores in this budget. There is also a reform in the system for deciding autonomy of colleges with a outcome-based system which is to be designed this year. There is a strong focus on online learning with the launch of 350 new courses in Swayam, the government's e-learning platform. However, the budget for e-learning has reduced from last year by 50 crores. Skill building has seen a major thrust with as many as 4 new schemes which have been introduced. Each district will have its own Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Yojanas, best-in-class skill development centers to foster skill development among the youth. With a view of supplying a global workforce, 100 India International Skills Centers have been set up to give cutting-edge industry training as well as training in foreign languages. 400 crores have been set up for the Sankalp scheme with the ambition to train more than 3.5 crores youth in skill building. With a view of improving the quality of industrial training institutes, Strive has been set up. This program will focus on industry collaborations and internships, and there is an outlay of over 2,000 crores. Summing up the budget, there is a very strong focus on skill development and on higher education. The primary sector does have some initiatives, but it falls short of being a game changer for the primary and secondary education sectors. However, the important thing to know is that the state government controls 2/3 of the funding for primary and higher education, and therefore a lot depends on how the states implement these schemes.
Thank you, Shyam. That seemed fairly comprehensive and presented in a very concise manner for our audience. We next move on to Apula. who is our in-house researcher on infrastructure, housing, urban development and urban planning. And she has her own take on what the budget had in store for this. Apula?
Thank you, sir. So I think the budget 2017-18 was a progressive step towards affordable housing, as it's trying to bridge the gap between constructed and sanctioned houses. So the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Urban, which is a flagship program of the central government, received an allocation of 6,043 crores, a 19% increase over the 2016-17 estimate of 5,075 crores. One of the most important announcements for affordable housing was that it received infrastructure status. This will make financing easy, as now developers will be able to access institutional credit very easily. So last year, a profit-linked income tax exemption scheme was launched for promoters of affordable housing. This time, the criteria for affordable housing was changed from built-up area of 30 and 60 square meters to a carpet area of 30 and 60 square meters. Also, the 30 square meter limit will apply only to the 4 metropolitan cities, whereas rest of the country will get the criteria of 60 square meters. This will make the scheme more lucrative for developers and more attractive to buyers, as more spacious houses will be available. This in turn will ensure that the developers can reach a larger buyer pool. Some changes in capital gain tax provisions with respect to land and building assets have also been announced in this budget. The holding period, which was for 3 years earlier, has now been reduced to 2 years. This is expected to make assets more mobile. The base year for indexation has also been shifted from 1st April 1981 to 1st April 2001 for all classes of assets. This is likely to reduce the amount of tax that is paid. Importantly, the impact of demonetization is quite evident on lending rates. Surplus liquidity with banks has led to reduction in the lending rates, including for housing. Also, the Prime Minister in his New Year Eve's address to the nation announced interest subvention of 3% and 4% to housing loans of 12 lakh and 9 lakh respectively. This is likely to augment affordable housing in peri-urban areas of the country. Interestingly, the budget announced restricted cash payments to up to 3 lakhs, which is likely to help the affordable housing sector as well, because it should prevent black money from going back into real estate once the economy is fully remonetized. So overall, the budget was a progressive step towards affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Apula. Definitely the budget seems to have a lot in store for affordable housing. Let's see how it shows up further. Now we move on to Kamal. Kamal is our research associate working on international relations, and he has some interesting takes on what the budget announced in that sector. Kamal?
So, two things that stood out for me. One was the abolition of the FIPB, and the other one was the step that has been taken to clean up the system of political funding in the country. So FDI in India basically comes from two routes, the automatic route and the government approval route. So over the years, what has happened is with increasing liberalization of the FDI regime, more and more FDI has been coming through the automatic route, and the finance minister pointed out that 90% actually comes from the automatic route. Now what this has made is that it has made the FIPB sort of irrelevant. And also the discretionary powers that the FIPB has, they don't really inspire much confidence among the investors. I mean, it is a body, it is an interministerial body made up of bureaucrats from different ministries, from the MEA, Commerce and Industry, and the Department of Economic Affairs. And most importantly, the abolition of FIPB can be seen as part of the larger strategy that this government has been employing to attract more and more FDI. Now, if you see in the last 2 years, in November 2015, 15 sectors were liberalized, FDI in 15 sectors, and in June last year, in 2016, 7 sectors the FDI norms were liberalized, including defense, pharmaceuticals, and civil aviation. And besides that, the government has also taken other measures like liberalizing the FDI norms for the PIOs, the OCIs and the NRIs, considering their non-repatriable investments on par with those of the citizens, and also granting permanent residency status to foreign investors who meet certain set criteria in terms of investment and employment generation. This is something that happens in the top FDI destinations of the world, like Hong Kong and Singapore. So that is a very interesting reform that the government has done. So a lot of such reforms that have taken place in the last 2 years, and these have shown visible results as well. If you see the World Investment Report of the UN, according to that, the FDI has risen from 35 billion in 2014 to about 44 billion in 2015. So visible results can be seen, but still the FDI that is required in India is a lot more. I mean, if you look at the FDI to GDP ratio of India, it is still only 1.7%. Now compare that to 2.8% of China, and we know how big the Chinese GDP is. And in this region, you have Vietnam with 4.9%, which is the highest. So a lot of FDI is further required. So overall, in the global scenario of increasing uncertainties, a lot of inward and protectionist tendencies, the abolition of FIPB sends out a very positive signal. It sends out the message that India is committed to cut red tapeism, to make it easy for businesses to do business, and make it easy for foreign investment to come in. The other aspect that I wanted to talk about was political funding. So the finance minister has announced this, and according to the new set of rules, political funding can happen in 4 different ways. The first is that donations can come in through your check. The second one is through cash, and till now the limit was 20,000 rupees, and now that has been cut short to 1/10 of that amount. So a single anonymous donor can only donate up to 2,000 rupees in cash, and that is a very significant move. Because parties, it becomes very difficult for political parties to claim that a lot of their donations has come through this particular route, because it's a very small amount. The third way is through digital means. Now for this, parties and political leaders have to make appeals, like Obama makes appeals, and so to secure donations through very small amounts. And this is a route which has a lot of positivities, because once your donations start coming in small amounts, there is no there are no strings attached, right? You don't owe these people any favors, and that is good for a democracy. And the fourth and the most interesting way and a very innovative way is the whole concept of electoral bonds, and it is very uniquely Indian in every sense, because in 2003 actually there was a tax exemption that was brought in for political funding, and the expectation was more and more people will send in funds through the formal route, through checks and other formal routes. But that did not happen. People still chose to have, send cash donations, and that was the norm. That was the majority of how political funding happened. But this is a very innovative approach, because what it does is it addresses the problem with the previous approach. And the problem was that the donors didn't want their identities to be revealed because of fear of retribution. We have had cases in some states like Tamil Nadu and Bihar. So this was a problem, and the whole idea of electoral bonds addresses this particular problem, because now a donor buys electoral bonds and can donate and can give this electoral bonds to any political party. So the identity of the donor is protected. So there is no fear of retribution. And at the same time, all of this is through white money. So the black money part is pushed away, and that's how it really helps in the whole process of cleaning up political funding.
Thank you, Kamal. So I think with this very short presentation of Vision India Foundation's take on the budget, we have been able to concisely summarize the 3 different sectors: education, housing, international relations, and also to a small extent also the political funding, the interesting reforms which have happened. So in a very short presentation, I hope our audience was able to get what this budget has in store for these different sectors, and most of these reforms have passed under the radar, as I said previously. So I hope you made the best of this and hope to see you soon. Thank you.